Okay, now the Battle of Shiloh really develops some of those goals that I have when it comes to battle study. And one of those things is being developing and understanding the senselessness of war. The second one being doing a character study to see what makes somebody successful and also unsuccessful or deficient in some form or fashion. When it comes to the senselessness of war, William Tecumseh Sherman puts it in words for us. Now, he is one of the leaders. Eventually, he becomes a general for the Union Army, but he's fighting for the North. And later on in his battle experience, he says this quote: "Even success, the most brilliant, is over dead and mangled bodies." So even when you're victorious, it still means that some people aren't going to come home. So he realized how terrible war is. And the video you watched does not really go deeply into the ugliness of this battle or some of the examples of how bloody and nasty it was. But I want to go into those. So I'll start off first here with this. From the Battle of Shiloh, T.J. Dupree, a Confederate lieutenant, stated that he was riding horseback when a solid cannonball was bouncing down the field towards him. It hit his horse that he was sitting on, and it killed the horse instantly. That same cannonball then struck another horse and killed that horse. And it finally struck another one in the shoulder, and it killed that horse. It knocked Dupree down, and he was injured. He's going to survive, but it killed three horses in one fell swoop. Now, second example, Robert Oliver, a Union soldier, Union private, is near Shiloh Church at the start of the battle when he kneels down behind a boulder. His commanding officer yells to him, "Oliver, as soon as you get your gun loaded, take Amesbury to the rear." Well, a second later, he sees this officer get struck by a canister shot. That's some of those metal balls you see coming out of the cannon on the top of this slide here. He takes a canister shot to the head, tearing part of his head clean off. It kills that commanding officer instantly, and he actually sees the commanding officer's sword go flying 10 feet in the air. Oliver then followed the order and he returned to the fight. As soon as he did, he heard an old friend call out to him, "Robert, for God's sake, don't leave me." He looked over to see James D. Godwin walking towards him, wearing only his pants and bathed in blood. Oliver helped Godwin to the rear. He grabbed his arm, put it around his neck, and then carried him back towards the rear, got him to a medic. But as he's carrying him there, he feels Godwin's body get struck more times with enemy bullets. By the time he gets to the medic tent, Godwin had 7 bullet holes in him, and Godwin obviously would die that day. Ann Wallace, the wife of Brigadier Will Wallace, you see the Will in the picture to the right, had her father, her brothers, and her husband fighting in the Battle of Shiloh. She was on a boat trying to tend to the wounded, and in the middle of the battle, she caught the glance of an army chaplain who's also on that same boat, and he said to her, "This is an awful battle. You have great men of relations on this field. You can't expect to see them all again." She responded, "We fought at Fort Donelson, and we survived that." He looked at her with a grim look and said, "It is an awful battle." After the first day's fight, Anne rushed to her husband as he was brought in wounded to the boat. Will took a musket ball to the head and could not see. He was blinded. He recognized Anne's voice, but he experienced inflammation and his pulse began to fail, and Will passed away, right in Anne's arms. Even Ulysses S. Grant, the commanding officer for the Union Army, he also experienced bloodshed. He was lucky to survive this battle, but as soon as he got to the field, one of his aides took a cannonball to the head. It took his brains and splattered them, brains, blood, all sorts of different parts, splattered them all over Ulysses S. Grant's uniform. So as soon as Grant got to the field, he actually had to wipe brains off of his coat, and then he continued on. And the crazy thing is, Ulysses S. Grant's actually fearful in the sight of blood, but yet he kept his cool all day and somehow dealt with the situation, which is certainly a weakness of his. But a terrible, terrible battle, and it doesn't compare to any of the battles before. The Battle of the First Bull Run had 5,000 casualties. Shiloh had 23,000 in these 2 days. A terribly, terribly bloody battle. And it's something that these soldiers would never forget. A lot of these guys were rookies. They had never been in a battle before. And this is an absolutely just terrible one to experience ever. Never mind for your first battle ever. Now, we forget, everyone always forgets how terrible war is. Unless you yourself are a soldier, you don't seem to truly understand how terrible war is. And a commander, I think about Colin Powell, who used to be a great commander during Operation Desert Storm in Iraq, He would say that his most nervous time is when he's ordering an invasion, ordering an attack, because he's nervous for those soldiers. A soldier truly understands how terrible battle can be and how families are going to be disrupted by it. What you see in the picture is some of the people celebrating when their country declared war to start World War One. England, Germany, all sorts of countries celebrated when they declared war. They celebrated when the war was over too. But the thing is, war is not child's play. War is not a game. People die and families are disrupted. We should be celebrating the ending of war. We should be celebrating the prevention of war. But war in itself is a terrible thing, and we should try to avoid it at all costs if possible. There are reasons to go fight, but they better be serious. We just better not be kind of ticked off at this country for something very light. It better be a good reason why we're deciding to fight and put people's lives at risk, both ours and the people in that other country, because innocent people will die in any war. Now, the other piece of the story here is about Ulysses S. Grant. And I have here, it's a story of great leadership, but also lack of preparation. For Grant, he was entirely caught by surprise at the beginning of the battle. He did not expect the Confederates to attack, and he told his men not to dig trenches, believing that if they get too defensive minded and sit behind trenches, they're not going to be aggressive, they're not going to want to attack. But the blood of those dead soldiers is on his hands. Now, at the same time, when he got there, and when the battle got heated, Ulysses S. Grant was riding up and down that line on horseback, trying to encourage his troops, trying to make sure to fill in any weak gaps that they possibly had in the line. But he was a fantastic on-the-spot leader, trying to do everything he could to make sure that his troops are going to be suited and victorious and have everything they needed to be successful that day. So he was in a frenzy, going here, going here, going here, making sure to prepare them and making sure to reassure them throughout the day so they keep fighting and try to find victory. As well, when everyone else thought that they didn't have a chance, when everyone else was thinking about trying to pack up on those boats and go home, Ulysses S. Grant was still focused on victory, still trying to find the weak spots of the Confederacy, still trying to come up with a plan for the next day. And he had the wherewithal and the focus to find a way to find victory and to realize if we're weak, if we're tired, if we're hurting, they are too. It may just take one further advance to try to push through them and gain success. And that's exactly what they achieved on that second day on April 7th of 1862. So Ulysses S. Grant, yes, he was deficient in some areas, but in the thick of the battle, he was a fantastic leader. And some people, because of the casualty count that Grant suffered on the, especially the first day of the Battle of Shiloh, some people wanted him fired. But Lincoln tossed back. He said, I cannot spare this man. He fights. Grant, he knew that Grant was a fighter, and Lincoln didn't have many fighters. And so he certainly wanted to keep the one guy that he knew was going to stay there in the thick of the fight. Now, to finish this up and also to bring back some of the stuff from the Anaconda Plan lesson in Winfield Scott, you're going to fill out this Google form. But that's all for today, outside of trying to fill out that exit ticket. But complete that and you're good to go. All right. Thank you very much.